The COO Roundtable brings together operations professionals at the top of their game to define and explore what it means to be highly effective in a scale-up organization. And what sits at the heart of it is highly curated peer-to-peer roundtables where COOs talk about things that matter.
I absolutely love my roundtable. We've been together for about 2 years, and without exaggeration, I have made friends for life.
To find out more, go to cooroundtable.com. That's cooroundtable.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Operations Room, a podcast for CEOs. I'm Brandon Mensinger, joined by my lovely co-host Bethany Ayers. What is happening?
I think I'm feeling about the same as you are, Brandon. Let's see if I can get my name out there.
It has been a very difficult week for the both of us, and we're both losing our minds.
Yeah, exactly. And I am desperate to take some time off, and I need a vacation. But we're 6 weeks past Christmas, and I had to make almost 2 weeks off at Christmas. I'm going to run out of all of my holiday time if I end up having to take serious breaks every 6 weeks. But I think I need something. So a weekend's not enough at the moment. I need a couple extra recovery days. It's half term, so that makes things a bit easier. Or, there's an incentive to take a couple days off. And then do I share this publicly? Don't I share this publicly? I don't know. I guess I'll share it publicly, even if it's not my news to share. But my oldest son got an offer from Cambridge, and the college is doing an open day for everybody who had offers next Thursday. And I've not been to the college yet. And so I quite want to go with him. So I was just thinking about taking next Thursday and Friday off, have a little look around the college. It's really cool. Very proud of him, very relieved. But the UK system is one where an offer isn't the same as actually going. It's a conditional offer based on your A-level results. So now the hard work starts. And also because of the system, he'll sit his exams through May and June. And then you don't find out to the beginning of August. I think it's the 8th of August, something like that. You get the results. And then you either have the scores to get your offer or you don't. So it's a very long wait from February till August to know where you're going.
That's brutal. Yeah, it's very much a performance-oriented system, isn't it? To quite a high degree. I mean, getting pre-approved with a condition whereby your results have to be phenomenal, and then that test is kind of a couple months out. Then you actually do the test, and you still don't get the actual outcome from the conditional approval until several months after that. That feels like a brutal process.
It really is. And also, so another proud mother moment, he got offers from all 5 universities he applied to. But then what you have to do is choose your first and second choice, and then all the others get released back to the universities. So you wait till August to find out. In his case, it's A* AA for Cambridge, ABB for his second choice, and all of his other choices. So it's so you either do it or you don't. But if he doesn't get it, then it goes into this clearing process, and you just try and find something that matches your grades that you want to do, or you take a gap year. It's incredibly stressful.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds rough. Before they're even getting out into the real world of stress and work life and all that, they have to deal with this juggernaut of performance.
Yeah. And so I'm not looking forward to the build up to August 6th or 8th or whatever date it is. Like for GCSEs, we had the same thing. And for about 4 weeks, he just fought me. He's like, I failed English. I don't want to resit English. I never want to do English again. I was like, first of all, let's just wait and see what you got before we know that you failed or not failed. And secondly, it has nothing to do with me. It's a requirement that everybody gets a GCSE in English in order to go on to the next thing. It's a national requirement. Fighting me is not going to make a difference. And then he would come back to me I'm not going to do it. I failed it. I'm not going to do it. We did that for weeks and weeks. And then we got his scores, and he got 9s in English. So, which is the highest, but he was absolutely convinced he had failed. And so I feel like his barometer is off. And so I suspect that we're going to have a repeat of that. And we're going to spend weeks and weeks with him convinced that he's failed things. So to get a top score, you have to be a creative thinker, and it's not just regurgitating. There has to be something special. And so I can see that you're playing it back in your mind. Were you doing something special good or something special really bad? And just not quite sure which way it went.
When I think back to university days, because I remember before I got into the business administration program, there's like that 2-year period of taking various courses that have to be at a certain level to get into the business program. And one of the core requirements was Calculus 2. So I took Calculus 2, and it is the only course I ever failed. I got a D. And same thing. I walked away from that course. I'm like, I can't do this. I just can't do it. I don't know how to do calculus. It's brutal. I cannot figure this stuff out. And I'm not getting into the business program, and my life is shattered. So I think it took me, 2 months to reset a little bit, reconcile myself. And then I was like, all right, I got to do this again. Fine. So I took sort of summer school for university courses, took calculus again, and then just bore down as much as I could. And it wasn't fabulous. I think I got a C or a C plus or something. So it dragged down my GPA, but it was enough just to get the credit for the course to move on. And
Yeah, calculus was really hard for me as well, because I spent my junior year in Germany, and that's where we were doing pre-cal and trigonometry. And when I went to Germany, they were doing calculus. So I learned calculus in German with no build up to calculus. And then when I came back for my final year in high school, they just were like, okay, so now you're doing AP calculus. And so then I did calculus again in English, but still without any of the foundation. And I don't understand trigonometry at all. I've never learned trigonometry. And so I ended up passing calculus and getting some sort of AP. I can't remember what I got. I definitely didn't get the top mark, but I didn't fail it either. No idea how to do it, memorized it, understood nothing. And then when I went to uni, I ended up doing a macro or microeconomics that was basically just calculus. And again, no idea what I was doing. And then I did a political science degree graduate class that was calculus. So I have taken calculus, I think 4 times, once in German, one AP calc, once with an economics lens, once with a political science lens. I managed to pass them all with, slightly better than you, Brandon, but not A's. And I have no idea all 4 times what I was doing, why I was doing it, rote memorization. Yeah, I was like, oh, I have seen this thing before. This is what I do. Done. No idea why at all. So I do sometimes feel like I should just go and do pre-cal and trigonometry to understand what sine and cosine and tangent are.
What do you mean? As a 48-year-old person? Is that what you're saying?
I just feel like there's a real gap because I genuinely have no idea. But I still feel and then maybe I could take calculus and go, oh.
The shame of your lack of understanding of calculus and trigonometry.
Yeah. And I was like, so that's why when I move the thing at the top, the exponent down, and that creates the area underneath the curve. Now I understand why.
If I was to think about the top 5 things in the world that I would really not want to do, this clearly ranks in the top 5 of having to take a calculus course again. I think I would shoot myself. It's worse than taking a remedial driving course lesson. We have to sit there for 3 hours and listen to these people talk about the rules of the road. So I went to a JBM event this week. So JBM is one of the executive search firm recruiters in London. James Mitra had invited me to come down to the event. It was kind of like a small curated set of folks. So you feel special. I think there was about 20 of us, 25 of us.
Was that the live recording?
Yes, that's right. So I was the head of recruiting for Lovable. So this head of recruiting for Lovable guy, he worked for Meta before. He worked for Neuralink with Elon Musk. So he had a bit of a pretty spectacular track record behind him. So obviously great guest to land for the podcast. And from an audience standpoint, somebody of interest to listen to. He said they do massive amounts of back channeling for every single person. We're talking 10 calls with 10 people, and back channeling obviously is a divisive topic for recruitment because people feel that in some respects it lacks integrity because you're not notifying the person that you're doing this. But he said at Lovable, it's like a key aspect of their recruitment efforts to ensure that the person that they're hiring is in fact a phenomenal person. And then the second bit that he mentioned, he said they don't do it very often, but it's an actual thing whereby they'll identify a person of interest that they really, really like. They do a tremendous amount of back channeling and then literally send that person an email without even speaking with them saying, you're phenomenal. We want to offer you a job. here's the amount of money that we're going to pay you. This is what the role type is. If you like this, get in contact and we can chat. So it's a bit of like, it sounds like madness to me in some ways, but I guess if you're lovable, just making a direct overture to that person with an actual quasi offer would make sense.
I think it's radical, but I don't know if it's as successful as it's a radical idea, but either they've only just started doing it or it hasn't actually converted many people yet, because otherwise he'd give you the numbers.
Yeah. And actually in this light, he also mentioned that their expectations around probation, they make it a huge deal. And they tell the candidates from the outset, well, you've landed the job, but just be aware that you may not have this job in 3 months. They make it very clear that there's a reasonable probability that you're not going to make it past probation, setting expectations that what is required from you in that first 3 months will be under heavy scrutiny and you need to deliver the goods. And if you don't, you're not going to pass probation. So I felt like this more aggressive form of probation tracking seems like a good idea, just generally speaking.
Particularly with the change in UK employment law. Although I don't know, are they UK based? Are they Swedish?
They are Swedish, yeah.
And so I have no idea what Swedish law is like, but some of it you just have to be aware, particularly like in the UK with the employment laws changing, that it's only for the first 6 months that you can easily get rid of mishires and rather than further. Bridgewater, the hedge fund does something similar, but I don't think it's 6. I don't think it's 3 months. I think it's the first year is basically a trial year. And some of it is your performance and level of bar, but it's also whether or not you can handle their culture. So it's like, can you stick with it or can you not stick with it? I'm a fan of laying your stall out, the Shackleton ad about you might not return. I don't remember. Was it Shackleton? You might not return from the Arctic and it's going to be horrible. You're going to be cold and it's blah, blah, blah. But like, who's with me? I much prefer that kind of culture and bravery to get the right people around you than we're a family. Everybody's awesome. Let's retain everybody and adjust the culture to you.
Yeah, I agree, especially in scale-ups, because scale-ups are a burning bridge and there's no turning back. There's only one way, which is forward. And, we're going to make it or we're going to kind of drown making it, essentially, which is true in venture terms. So I agree 1,000%. And I think in practice, I think this is where I fall down to some extent. We were just having this chat before the podcast, but you come across very difficult decisions sometimes that are, I don't know what you want to call it, your feelings and your emotions sometimes cloud your cold, rational, hard logic of the burning bridge. And it's sometimes hard to reconcile the two, where you fight with yourself to some extent.
The absolute hardest is the almost good performer, really good guy bucket or good person bucket. And you just have to make that call and be really dispassionate about it.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Anything else this week from a biz point of view?
There seems like a feeling in the last 2 weeks that suddenly people understand that AI is real. And I think the market's just going to shift so quickly. And then did you see the article by Matt Schumer that came out? Not an article, like a blog post. I was sent it multiple times yesterday. So I think it's making the rounds. So I feel like by the time this podcast comes out, either the world will have fundamentally changed or it won't. But the start of the article is that it feels like the beginning of COVID. It feels like February 2020 when there's like, oh, something's happening in China. There are people with coughs. Is this going to be something? And then obviously 3 weeks later, the world fundamentally was a different place. And he was saying in the article that he feels like that's where we are with AI. And like we are just on the precipice of everybody getting it and things being fundamentally different. And so given our proposition and we're about AI data security or data security for AI, I am very excited about it and trying to figure out how we capitalize on it in the market. But then his article is also like quite terrifying in ways and like the idea of it being another COVID. So I'm really feeling like this quite unease and shifting sands, but time will tell. I use a bit of the COO roundtable as part of my bellwether, that's the word, where after OpenClaw, suddenly on the COO roundtable WhatsApp, everybody's like, ooh, AI for ops. What are you doing for AI for ops? How are you changing stuff in operations? And it's like for 3 years, there's been almost no talk. Maybe one person on occasion asks a question. And then suddenly OpenClaw opened people's imaginations. They're like, oh, this technology works now and it can do stuff. What am I going to do? And I was actually the person on the WhatsApp who's always been the proponent of AI going, don't use OpenClaw in your work. Here are the blog posts we've written to keep you safe. Here are some just like basic guardrails. Please don't play with fire, particularly not in your business. And that's the part that I'm selfishly excited about because it's going to be great from Atomic, but also worried about because we have just unleashed a technology that is unlike anything we've ever unleashed before. And at some point soon, AI is going to be smarter than we are. And what is that going to mean? And what are we going to do with it?
We are revving up the engine of the podcast and looking for a great brand to sponsor the show. We have over 7,000 listeners now across COOs, CEOs, founders, and operational professionals who are decision makers for all kinds of technology, including HR, planning, strategy, legal, and other tools.
It's Beth here. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the podcast, and we'd love to keep it going, but we're going to need to get some sponsors in order to do that. So if you work at a company that could benefit from speaking to listeners like you or know of a company that might benefit, please send them our way.
To find out more, go to operationsroom.co/sponsorship. That is operationsroom.co/sponsorship. So we've got a great topic for today, which is the BizOps Anti-Playbook. We have an amazing guest for this, which is Vessela Clewley. She's the author of the Strategy BizOps Anti-Playbook. She is a fractional CEO and formerly of Hopin, WeWork, and Uber in various operational roles. So the first question to you is, Vessa has worked with challenging CEOs at Uber, WeWork, and Hopin. And the question is, how do operators protect culture and decision quality when the CEO style is intense? And as I asked that question, I think the better question is more, how do you get the best out of that intensity from the CEO?
I'm not going to answer the question because I'm going to tell a story instead, which is we have new members, or I have new members of the leadership team. And we are definitely in a storming moment, in terms of that, like the storming, forming, performing framework. And we had a meeting this week around stuff. And for the first, I had these words come out of my mouth in a way that I never, ever thought would happen to me, which is I've been an operator for a very long time. I know what it's like working for CEOs. I know it can be difficult, but I now understand why they're difficult. And I am not going to change, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And these are the behaviors that you're going to expect from me. And I'm not changing. And I'm going to have ideas. I'm going to have too many ideas. I am going to want us to change direction quickly because the market is changing so fast and there will be distractions. We are not going to be working on a year-long plan or even a quarter-long plan because everything is changing so rapidly that what I need you to do is build the systems that can handle uncertainty rather than expect me to deliver certainty to you. And then the team just looked at me. I was like, okay.
Yeah. You know what, though? I think that level of clarity coming from the CEO directly in the leadership meeting, that is what is sorely missing in a lot of these companies, because oftentimes the CEOs that are intense, they'll never verbalize the expectation or verbalize kind of the clarity that you just expressed to me in 2 seconds, which is, this is what I'm about. This is what to expect. And this is the approach that I'm taking. So in effect, you're kind of setting out your stall with the leadership team to understand that and be in a position where ultimately they're going to have to embrace it because they're working with you as a CEO, not the other way around. So I think that is rather important. And I think in the past, I've worked with CEOs where it was always unspoken, or there was a lot of frustration or angst with the CEO in relation to the leadership team in different forms and flavors over time. And this is more broad to the company as well, which is in all hands, having the courage and the clarity, like what is expected, what is wanted, what is not wanted. We like to do a lot of rah-rah stuff and kind of back away from some of these like harder messages because we think it's not going to land well or people will be upset or whatever. But I think the reality is like clarity is better than not. And when I say clarity, very clear, like what are we doing? Why are we doing it? So even with things like hybrid or being office first or things that may be unpopular, whatever the belief is, rightly or wrongly, setting the tone, being clear about the expectations and making it happen.
Well, then there you go. I had a good leadership moment. It doesn't answer you how to work with the CEO, but maybe you can tell your CEO to be more clear. Be brave.
Yeah. I mean, I think the actual answer is all the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, I think, which is creating structures of different forums to ensure that the intensity is captured and bottled in a very useful way for the company. So whether that's very simple things like you have a leadership meeting with the right people, you have the right structure to that leadership meeting, you have your company KPI dashboard that you're looking at, whereby there's actions associated to it, red flags, and so on. There's deep dive topics with pre-reads where you have deep conversations about a particular subject matter. You make a decision, a high quality decision, because you have leadership stakeholders there. That's action. That moves on. You move on to the next topic. These are all kind of basic principles, I think, over the course of our podcast. We've talked about in different ways, I think, historically. The second question from Vessa was, Europe often treats ops as a cost center, while the US treats ops as a growth lever. And what is the deal with that? And how do we get Europe more in line with the US? Last question, just quickly moving on. When it comes to US expansion, Vessa had talked about the uncomfortable truth is that you don't have product market fit or go-to-market fit, and that you have to revalidate all of that when you go into the US. Do you believe that is true?
On the whole, yes. Post-COVID, things have changed a little bit because so much is done remotely and you can end up selling and actually growing a business before landing there. But I thought that was quite a nice insight of hers, and why expanding into America is so hard over and over again is because you don't have product market fit. You have different competitors. You have different culture, different legislative reasons, different market. And so in some ways I was like, that's why when you land in America, it takes you 18 months to really fly.
There's two things I would think about. Number one is getting your best sales rep in the UK to sell remotely into the US and to do trips out there to really do that first level of validation. Then pair that sales rep with a BDR from the UK selling into the US, and that's your second step. And then your third step is to get your US rep to move over there in some respect, whether it's that individual or another, get some transplanted domain experts that know what they're doing over there to kind of continue that process and then build from there. The second part that I would think about is getting a product person to do exactly the same thing, which is, I think the sales rep thing that I just described, people get that and people tend to do that, which makes obvious intuitive sense. What they don't think about is the second step, which is the product person doing exactly the same thing, early doors, going out there, talking to prospects ad nauseum to truly understand what is the difference in this marketplace from a product perspective that we need to understand now, because it's going to take us 6 months to build this stuff, instead of the sales reps selling into these customers, figuring out as you go. And then suddenly you have a whole tranche of changes they have to do, and you don't get those things done for another 6 months. And it's just going to slow down your sales cycle and hurt you in a way that you don't need. So why don't we park it here and get on to our conversation with Vessa.
The status quo in Europe when it comes to operations is kind of very much about, it's, a bit of finance and maybe a bit of people, give operations to functional leaders and just, set and forget and kind of don't worry about it. It's all going to take care of itself. The European founders usually think of operations kind of more as a cost rather than as a growth lever. And I think the issue that arises from that is that basically when you have a strategy, but nobody is actually responsible for the coherent delivery of it, you end up with this gap between strategy and execution. Like you think you're doing one thing, but actually you're doing something else, simply because your team is actually not executing on what you've actually told them to do. So all the way from marketing to finance, from, prospective cash to actually collecting the cash, you need to make sure you have kind of a fully operational system that kind of works as a whole. One thing that American companies figured out probably 2 decades ago now, because it started with Google, is that ops can be a real growth lever. So they basically marry strategy and operations, i.e. analytics and structured kind of problem solving, and the delivery of said kind of very big, complex programs along the company. And once they did this, they actually saw that, a very small team, kind of like a SWAT team, can kind of come in and kind of do something quite impactful for the company. So yeah, all those teams in companies like, Google, LinkedIn, Coinbase, on the European side now in Monzo, or even, newer companies like Atio or Marshmallow, they all have this kind of people that really break the silos that emerge between functions and help deliver the strategy for the company.
Okay, so fine. So tell me this, like, why do you think you're kind of connecting dots here as like Europeans don't really get it? It's kind of like a cost center mentality and they're doing a bit of finance and ops and all this stuff, but they don't see it as a growth lever. So why do you think that is? When I think about this stuff in my head, I'm like, so this is like a cultural thing. Like, what are we really talking about? Is because we simply don't have the muscle in the UK where people are experienced doing this stuff, where we have like a smaller community of like people like yourself that get it, but there's very few individuals that do get it. So therefore it kind of just doesn't happen basically. Or what's the rationale? What's the reason as to why you think this is?
I think there's probably kind of two main reasons. One is the investors on the US side are mostly ex-founders. They've been there, they've done that. They understand the challenges that come with scale. The investors that are on the European side are, when you look at their CVs, they've been, in consulting or banking. They've worked more with like big institutional type of companies where those functions are, very siloed and very segregated just by the nature of the size of those companies. And so from there, there is no push for European founders to have to learn these kind of things. They, learn by doing. But I think that the cycle for learning is, usually like 10 to 20 years. So by the time you get, a founder who is, a multiple, exit founder who can tell you, hey, I know exactly what kind of person I need and I can understand why, systems thinking within my company is important and they can understand how to make operations actually work for them. These are usually founders who are, already on their second or third company. And there's just not that many of them. So you just don't have that, I think, know-how. And the other thing, which is also important, is we don't have in Europe still the talent that's also done the rounds in that many multiple times across, different functions. And so they cannot even put the case in front of the founders that, hey, this is valuable and here's how it's going to work and make it very, very tangible, because you can't just tell them, hey, I'm going to do this kind of nebulous thing for you. No, they want to see the results. They want to see, okay, how are you going to structure it? Who's going to be there? What kind of talent do you need? How do you hire for it? BizOps is difficult to hire for because BizOps is, something very different in every company. And so you need to really kind of go in and understand what does that company need right now. The only thing that's common, especially if you're, let's say, B2B SaaS, BizOps usually starts with RevOps. As a BizOps leader, the first thing you hire for is like a RevOps person. And then you can grow from there. But if you want somebody who's going to be, potentially your COO, they need to have done, BizOps and obviously like RevOps, pricing, partners, probably a bit of legal, a bit of compliance, a bit of different things so that they can put, all the dots together.
Yeah. I mean, Brandon and I are definitely in that bucket.
All I do is connect dots every day. I'm just connecting everything.
Connect dots and lots of different functional expertise. I'm just going to posit the other question to you. So what can American founders learn from European ones?
I think American founders can learn a bit of discipline, mostly because obviously Americans are kind of like cowboys. Tech is the Wild West and, everything goes. And I think obviously that mentality comes with a lot of societal costs. So, move fast and break things can be, perfectly fine when you're Facebook. But if you are, doing a medical company, you cannot move fast and break things. So I think having probably more responsibility and accountability for what happens and not just thinking that, legal is they just say no. Sometimes they say no for a good reason. A good legal counsel is going to help you actually to do what you want to do, but in a way that you can do it rather than in a way that some, governmental body is going to come chasing you down the line. I think that is kind of a key learning.
Don't break the law. That's good. Okay.
It could be good. Yes.
So on this note then, so you've got your classic European founder. We want to go to the US. We've just raised our Series B. They're like, yeah, let's do this. I've got my 14-point checklist from Index Ventures, and we just need to hire some reps in the US and start the ball rolling. Let's do it ASAP. What are we getting wrong? Or what's the European founder getting wrong in their mentality?
So I think usually when you talk about expansion, what founders see is a lot of ARR on a spreadsheet. And it all looks great. It's all going to be a hockey stick. It's all going to be, I go into a new market and all of a sudden I have all this like new money just pouring in. A key assumption that I push founders to think about, and it's a very uncomfortable one, but I think it's very useful. They need to think that you don't have actually product market fit or go to market fit in the new jurisdiction in which you're going. And I say this because obviously the requirements of the market will be slightly different. And I think if you approach it with curiosity, you're going to learn much more versus trying to shove foie gras down somebody's throat. For example, when I was at Hopin, I can tell you we had obviously launched a global, B2B SaaS product. It was working well everywhere. Obviously, there was a lot of organic demand. I could look at my figures for Germany and I could tell that, we're selling basically a third of what we should be. And that rang a lot of bells and raised a lot of red flags. And when I spoke to my boss about it, it's like, okay, why is that happening? And I'm like, well, when you dig into it, you realize that obviously the product is great. People like it on a user level, but actually the go-to-market motion, which involves kind of going through all the GDPR stuff at the time, because also this was just launching. The Germans really...
They care a lot about GDPR.
Yeah. GDPR is a big thing. And they wanted things which obviously as a startup we couldn't provide. Like we want a data center in Germany, we want all these other things. Stuff which would take 12 months for us to deliver on the engineering side. So it was kind of impossible to do. I'm like, okay, great. It's fine for you to do this. But I was like, basically what is happening is we don't have that go-to-market fit for that market. So if you want to really tackle the market, you need to understand, okay, tick on the people team's request, which is all about headcount. Do we have the headcount there? Boots on the ground? Yes, we do. Have we figured out how to hire the people? Yes, we have. Okay, fine. Sales team, do they have the playbooks? Yes, they do. The customer wants the same. The CS team can work with them. Fine. But when it came to engineering and legal, there were a lot of things to be desired. And so we had to design basically a whole kind of program to prove to the regulator and therefore customers that, hey, we're going to be fully compliant in, say, 9 to 12 months, but we're going to start with, let's say, kind of, a legal cover letter. Here's the plan. Here's the things that are going to happen. And kind of walk them through it and basically solve a go-to-market problem with basically everything that kind of BizOps could help with. And so we really need to understand, usually you don't have product market fit, maybe go-to-market fit. Assume that so that you know kind of what can happen and understand that every single department will have a different point of view on what they want from that new go-to-market motion, basically balance those.
I've done US expansion 2 times and supported a couple other companies through it. And it always takes longer and costs more and has multiple failures along the way. And even knowing the failures still fail again. What are the top 3 things do you have that would just maybe possibly de-risk your US expansion? Or do you think that's impossible and you just have to budget 2 to 3 times as much as you think and 2 to 3 times longer to crack it?
I think when it comes to, let's say, US expansion, that one anyway is a bit easier, I think, because there are, plenty of parties that can help you with this now. But one thing is when you want to expand, that would be kind of the first thing. Like, what are the signs that you need to actually have an entity there?
Is it your investors demanding that you have an entity, not sign enough, or do you need a proper sign?
Well, here's where founders need to be able to kind of push back sometimes because the investors want it. Obviously, the investors have a point of view. Why do they want it? Is it because you're getting investment from the US? If that's the reason, then okay, that's a good enough reason, because otherwise you're not getting the investment. But if it is just an entity for entity's sake, there is no point. There's probably different times when you can spend the, 20, 50K on all the legal fees that you need to expand. So knowing when to do it, pushing back, since you've done it, multiple times, I imagine that you will, kind of roughly when that happens and you can push back on those things. And the other thing is, I think doing a little bit of upfront, kind of research with the actual, people who are both using and buying your product, kind of as a soft test, maybe as a soft launch, to know what are the real kind of challenges you're going to run into. So doing a little bit of that research, kind of big reveal, big kind of, here I am and I'm, putting my flag in the US, so to speak. Those are the kind of the 2 things I would do. And then I just get a good kind of finance and accounting firm to help you with the setup of kind of the back end of that, because US taxes get very, very complicated. So have the right partner there.
I have a question for you. So the initial kind of discovery piece around go-to-market fit and doing some level of like research, interacting with the initial set of prospects and customers, really feeling your way through it? Do we have any actual challenges with our so-called go-to-market fit, or what do we need to reconcile either from our product perspective or go-to-market motion perspective or what have you? Once you're past that phase, let's say we have some initial, as usual, UK folks going to the US, kind of feeling their way through this and identifying that. And you maybe hire your first person in the US, no office, and they start activating themselves. And you're like, all right, fine. So, we've done this part of it. We've done some level of discovery. It feels like we're on the right track. We're signing deals at some level of cadence that makes sense. And it feels like the product's doing its little trick and the motion seems to be working. We hire the first rep, seems to be, happening. Fine. Let's get our investment. Let's take the cash. Let's do the first big bash of like the first cohort effectively. So let's get an office in New York City. Let's hire a batch of 6 AEs and maybe a couple of BDRs. And let's install that team ASAP, all as one go around, basically. How do you ensure in that second step that things are successful? Because this is where I find things fall down a little bit, where you have your sense check, everything's cool. You hire the first cohort, they start ramping in. And then you're like, oh shit, they're not exactly ramping in as we expected. And you're like, is it them? Is it us? Is it the market? What is going on here?
When you have that one person that actually, can analyze and can really get the early signs or the leading indicators of, how this team is doing, you're going to be setting yourself up for success much better. Because kind of what's happening. And rather than, figuring out, oh, this team didn't ramp up, 6 months down the line, you can actually see how is that evolving kind of on a week by week and a month by month basis. So you can prevent a lot of those kind of future mistakes. The other thing I've seen companies do is obviously the one founder at least can go into the US and just keep an eye very, very closely. And I think just having that level of commitment from companies obviously gives the local team a sense that, hey, this is an important market and, what you're doing here matters. And obviously the founder can install some of, their own culture and obviously can show the learnings that they've usually accumulated through years of selling, on European side.
And that one, I think, is the lesson that businesses have to learn on their own over and over again. Because there's like a lot of European founders have no interest in moving to America. Some do, but oftentimes it's a forced moment, a year, 2 years too late.
No, I think so. And I think the founder definitely should be spending some time there. And, whether they really want to move kind of full time, it obviously depends on everybody's circumstance. If they have a family, they probably don't want to move everybody just like that. And that's perfectly understandable. But having maybe a chief of staff or somebody who is like a true representative of the C-suite of the company into the geography, I think really, really helps.
I just don't think it works without it. I mean, Brandon, have you ever seen it work without an original?
Yeah, it is fascinating. I've sort of seen it work because we went to the US for the Series B expansion and he decided not to move to the US. I mean, he was making frequent trips for sure, but we'd set up a New York City office. So, kind of this thing that I described, a ton of AEs, a ton of BDRs at the time. We hired pretty early on, kind of like our general manager, I guess. Like he definitely was like sales lineage from the industry, had his chops in place and was a bit broader in terms of this GM kind of capability and remit and so on. So he was an instrumental person, I would say, to kind of like professionalize our office situation. It was a good caretaker of what needed to happen across the GTM holistically, I suppose, and also was a good connection back to leadership back in the headquarters.
Was he American or did he come from the UK team or did you hire him in America?
We hired him independently as our GM from America. I think he was based in New York City himself. So he was, full on US in this case. So that initial kind of ramp in of what had to happen for Signal worked to a certain extent. And then we got to a certain level and then things kind of fell apart basically. And in that later stage, I was not a part of that. So I don't know why it fell apart exactly, but it did. So the moderate success is maybe the best way to characterize it. But I think to your point, the zeal of the founder, especially when you've raised cash, they're committed. They know they're next on the line a little bit. They're like, yeah, this US thing is our bet. I need to make this happen. I'm there.
I think this is one where kind of quote unquote going founder mode definitely pays off. Not that I like to use that phrase, but you kind of need to go and manage it yourself.
I also think that there's if founders can reframe being annoyed at having to move to America from their lovely, safe European homes, it gives them an opportunity to do what they do best, which is start at zero again and be properly entrepreneurial. Part of it is being a founder, and part of it is just it's actually their skills and they're doing the same thing again.
Yeah. Do we have PMF? Do we have go-to-market fit? Like, what's wrong? And then very quickly, like, funneling back, here's the problems.
Yeah. And networking like crazy, learning like crazy in a way that you do when it's your baby. So if we change tack a little bit or change topics, you've done a lot of pricing as part of your background and career. We are in the process of revisiting our pricing yet again.
Godspeed be with you. If I was religious.
Definitely part of the challenge is if you look at our competitors, nobody knows how to price, and pricing is all over the place, changing on a regular basis. There's no consistency. There's no way that customers are used to buying. And so it's like you can't even just steal somebody else's. It's quite a challenge right now. So who should lead it and how should we get started?
So yeah, pricing. First, I feel you in all the pain. And I want to say that actually what you're experiencing when you say our competitors haven't also figured it out and there's no real habits in how you buy, that's actually a great opportunity, I think, because then you can design it in a way which is from first principles. And you can design it in such a way that obviously your existing customers and your potential customers can both be on board for how they buy. So pricing, usually different companies that I've advised, pricing will either be led or begin to be led by, kind of the go-to-market side or by product, depending on what the real pain is with pricing. Now, the thing is that what a lot of founders, I think, don't understand well enough is that pricing is really, really complex as a matter. And what I mean by this is kind of it goes into the same territory as expansion or launching a channel partner motion or changing your business model, that kind of thing. Like it's something which touches every single part of your company, whether you like it or not. Even if you don't want to think about it, even if you think, I'm just going to change this on the marketing website and then I'm done like this. I have news for you. You're not because marketing obviously needs to do their part. Sales needs to do their part. Product, finance, everybody needs to be on board and coherently on board and together, because sales will be pushing you and say, oh, this is too expensive and we can't close. Therefore, we need the lowest price. CS will say, the way you've structured this, pricing spirals out of control. All of a sudden we see a lot of churn. That's a problem.
Or we can't expand. You sell everything to begin with. So where's the expansion for us?
Exactly. So where's my commission, so to speak? Obviously, if you price too low, then finance starts, raising flags and saying your margins are eroding. And obviously soon you don't have a business. So you throw in all these different, obviously, interests and very natural pulls and tugs. And if you end up changing them too often, then your operational team, whether it's, a central team or even within sales operations or product operations, they can't cope because they cannot change the systems in a coherent way that quickly. I dare you change Salesforce within a couple of days for a big pricing change.
And then you end up with cohorts of customers on a different pricing schedule. You're trying to figure out what they're paying and how. And
oh, yes. Try keeping track of it. And I can tell you, even AI cannot help you with this. It's very, very hard. And I think, so the issue is that obviously when you have pricing being led by like one of those departments, whichever one it is, could be finance, could be, whichever one, you end up biasing the outcome towards what they want. And that is an issue long term. Like you may think it's fine for the first 3 to 6 months even, but down the line, you end up having a lot of different problems. And so this is why I think a lot of companies really bring in kind of an external consultant sometimes who does pricing and kind of lead that. Or obviously if they have kind of a strategy and ops team, somebody within that will lead it. Sometimes could be with the help of somebody else as well, because not everybody is a pricing expert. I've done a number of changes, and every single time I've learned something new, changing from a platform and kind of a SaaS, pricing to a usage-based pricing, or everything being based on kind of outcomes and AI now, because obviously that's in vogue, and trying those kind of things. But you need to kind of take it as a full project, which you're going to then relearn and redo every 3 to 6 months, because like pricing is not a single change. It's not a flip of a switch. It's something which is kind of a fundamental part of the operations of your company. You need to do it consistently and coherently.
So when it comes to consistency around pricing and packaging, how do you do that? Because I feel like every time I've done this before, and pricing is never standalone pricing. It's always pricing and the packaging itself. They're intertwined very closely, obviously. So there's a certain level of complexity there between the packages and the prices and so on. So normally this has been like a strategic initiative that's been driven by me or somebody like me, basically, where you're pulling stakeholders together because you're right, it's cross-functional, impacts everyone, has to be thought through carefully because it's literally the pricing of the company. You don't want to screw what's happening. And also you have existing customers that aren't plans historically and how you kind of migrate those folks over to the new situation. All of it needs to be thought through rather carefully. And it's been successful, I would say, in terms of the strategic initiative focus or an OKR or whatever the case might be. What I've never got into the groove of, and I think partially because it was never really required, I guess, which is more the consistency part of it or revisiting it on some basis. Like once we did our strategic shift, we're like, boom, done. Let's move on. Next problem as an operator. So this consistency piece, tell me about that. Like how can that realistically happen, do you think, in scale-ups?
So this is something which I think most scale-ups need to actually look at their pricing and how it's working, probably on a 3 to 6 months basis. And I say this because usually the market will move kind of underneath you. And if you don't move with it, you probably will be leaving money on the table, or you might be losing, some opportunities for, upsell, that kind of thing. So it kind of goes back to the curiosity kind of lever that we've been talking about, just really kind of going again with talking to your ICP, talking to your existing customers, kind of figuring out what's bringing value for them, what is not. And maybe not rejiggling necessarily your pricing tiers or even the pricing itself, but more like what goes behind each package so that you can drive people up a value chain of the product, basically.
What's the practice, I guess, is what I'm asking. You know what I mean? Like, does this still sit with Brandon? Do I pull these people together like once a quarter or something? Or like, what are we doing here?
So I think usually if you have kind of a operations generalist type of a person, or maybe somebody within product ops, or maybe somebody within kind of RevOps, they can be tasked with doing kind of a periodic review of this and bringing kind of an analysis, like how is it going? How is it working? If there is a need for a big change, then obviously they can pull in everybody together. It can become kind of a bigger thing again. But it's good to have somebody within at least probably one of those two buckets that looks at it on a quarterly basis.
And what are they looking at? Gross margin, win rates, expansion?
So they will be looking at kind of, first kind of starting with the go-to-market funnel, reasons for deals won or lost, and how does pricing kind of fare in there? Because usually that's kind of a key reason, either or.
That's interesting because I normally just disregard losses for price being too much. Because I guess it's just if it becomes higher. No, because normally I'm like, yeah, that's just a salesperson who didn't explain value rather than actually too high a price. But I guess if it goes out of the normal range, that's when you should look at it.
But did they not explain it, or the person just didn't actually value it? So this is where I think there's a second layer of why, which you can get to kind of understand, is this really driven by lack of value, or maybe just, you have a sales team which is underperforming? Could be multiple reasons.
Okay, so I guess if it's like out of the normal range of pricing as a reason, that's something to look at.
No, absolutely. And you can look at, like, for example, in your CS team, are they managing to upsell, and for what reasons? Are the packages adequate or not? If, the team has tried to upsell, but actually the customer, doesn't want to because they have everything within a package, maybe there's time to rethink the packages to make sure that there is a path forward for upsell. So those kind of things I'd look at.
And then you talked about the outcomes, like the new AI fad of charging per outcome. And so obviously thinking about it with us, do you think it always works? Like the example, okay, cool. Because I was like,
no,
because sometimes it's not really, even if you're using AI, it's not an outcome-based solution that you're reducing cost in.
And I think this goes back to the discussion about really figuring out what kind of value is your customer really buying. So pricing based on an outcome works for Zendesk or Intercom because the outcome is very clearly definable and quantifiable. But if your outcome is something quite more nebulous or something that takes longer for your customer to actually see and get to, then probably that's not the right pricing.
And I guess also it's like, now we're just going straight into our actual problems at work thinking is one of the things that we do is scan all of your SaaS assets and tag them and tell you whether or not they're sensitive and what kind of sensitive information are in them. And so I guess like the outcome could be that every single asset you have is labeled.
That's not the end value. Yeah, that's not the end value. That's a means to an end.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, ultimately, it seems like everything that we do lands on some version of compute. And I'm just not sure if customers really care about compute as like their value metric. So I'm trying to figure out what are we computing where there is value in a customer's eyes. And also like in reality, there are different customers within the company that have different value. You know, like the people who are end users view value very differently to the exec who's owning it. Yeah.
I think that's a great case for actually doing proper research when you can figure out what is, as you say, the value that you're bringing and what are also customers willing to pay. Because sometimes they'll see the value, but they may say, I just don't want to pay XYZ for this because it's not worth it for me. And so really segmenting and really going for that. And it's basically where your ICP segmentation becomes critical. And you can end up actually with a go-to-market motion, which is super, super niche with, I need this kind of IT exec with this kind of background who understands X, Y, and Z and has done, some other thing, and just sell to them and create all the motions to really go after them. Because then they become your champion and they can become the person that convinces everybody else, hey, there is real value in this. And can be, they can defend you in front of everybody else.
You just need to find them, the needle in the haystack.
Exactly. It actually just happens with a lot of talking to them and like really finding the why. And I haven't found actually a shortcut for finding the why from data sets. I want to say I always find the why with talking to people, the real why that is. Obviously, a big data set will help you quantify how big that why is, but really kind of going after the real humans behind the story. Humans still matter, even in the age of AI.
We are rapidly running out of time, but nobody gets out of here without answering our final question, which is, if our listeners can only take one thing away from the episode today, what is it?
I think the key thing that I would say is if you're scaling a company, start thinking about systems thinking and get the right people in your team to help you execute on that.
Thank you, Vess, for joining us on the Operations Room. If you like what you hear, please subscribe or leave us a comment, and we will see you next week.